The transition to remote work back in 2020 made me realize something about myself. I talk with my hands, or at least I used to. Seeing myself represented in a rectangle on Zoom calls made me painfully aware of how expressive I was with my hands and my eyebrows, and how much my actions made me stand out, especially in contrast to my white colleagues. So over time, I found myself dialing back both my hand gestures and my facial expressions. And this just adds to all the code switching I was already doing. Today we're gonna talk about what the hell code switching even is, how it fuels white supremacy, and books to better understand all of this. Let's get into it. The term was coined in the 1950s by Einar Hogan and is often described as a change in linguistics to match that of the person or people that you're speaking to, more often than not in an effort to fit in or to make them feel more comfortable. But I think it goes so much deeper than this. It's not just the words that you speak and how you speak them, but it's also the way that you dress and the way that you present yourself. A large part of this is nonverbal communication, and a perfect example of this is President Obama greeting a white assistant coach, followed by greeting Kevin Durant. And while we're here, I want to make it clear what code switching isn't. It's not about changing who you are as a person, your morals, values, what you stand for, what you find okay and not okay. And it's not a matter of impressing, but rather a matter of survival. You change your demeanor in order to fit the situation at hand. Code switching has higher stakes for Black people than other minorities. We often feel the need to code switch because our Blackness isn't accepted in a lot of places. In fact, nearly half of Black college grads say they feel the need to change the way they talk around people of other races. We're often code switching from AAVE, or African American Vernacular English, which is its own dialect and has its own rules, to a more mainstream English, something that more closely resembles those in power who most times are white. I'll drop links down in the description for videos that explain AAVE and its origins in an effort to keep us focused today. So while most Black people fluidly code switch, not everyone has the ability or the willingness to do so. When that happens, the result can be tragic, and the 2013 George Zimmerman trial was a painful reminder of that. Zimmerman, a former neighborhood watch captain, was charged with second-degree murder in the shooting of Trayvon Martin, an unarmed 17-year-old Black boy in Florida. Rachel Jeantel was the prosecution's star witness and a close friend of Trayvon's. She recounted a phone call they shared in the final moments of his life, and when she testified, she did not code switch.
I had asked him how the man looked like. He looked like a creepy ass cracker.
And it became pretty clear that folks weren't judging the facts of her story, but rather her language.
I don't think she came across as brutally honest. I think she comes across as brutally ignorant. She is going to aggravate the jury, and every time she opens her mouth, her credibility gets chipped away and chipped away. And without credibility for a star witness, the prosecution has lost points by putting her on the stand.
And I know I said that we would stay focused today, but I have to tell you that in the end of all of that, Zimmerman was acquitted of his charges. But to add insult to injury, this motherfucker had the gall to sue the Martin family for $100 million in a defamation and conspiracy case, which was rightfully dismissed by a judge. So you can see how our Blackness inherently screams trouble in a lot of white spaces and in a lot of public spaces. So many people feel threatened and want to call the cops when they see something as benign as an unrecognizable Black person walking through their neighborhood, like we saw with Trayvon Martin, or simply waiting for a business meeting in a Starbucks. It's obvious to say that racism is at the center of all of this. We still, to this day, as a country, haven't confronted racism or tried to get to the root of why it is that we code switch. And while modern companies of today shout diversity buzzwords like bring your full self to work, the reality is white people prefer for their Black colleagues to code switch, and they deem code switching as professional workplace behavior. Since white people have disproportionate access to the power to distribute fair treatment and employment opportunities, making them feel comfortable is necessary for Black people to safely navigate society. We see Black people go above and beyond to conform to white beauty standards with things like dressing in a certain way or straightening our hair. And the issue gets exacerbated when we see countless instances of white people taking matters into their own hands, literally, and cutting the hair of Black children in schools or before they perform in sporting events. All of these concerted efforts to fit the ideal of what's acceptable or professional just pours fuel on the fire that is white supremacy. When it comes to books, there's two that I want to chat about today: Cain and The Vanishing Half. Cain, by Jean Toomer, was originally published in 1923 and reflects the complexity of racial performance. Toomer, who was one of the most prominent writers of the Harlem Renaissance, was no stranger to this concept since he was a mixed-race man that passed for white. The book is a bit of an experimental novel that mixes poetry and prose over a series of short stories, which is largely set in rural Georgia. Throughout the book, we see that the characters exist in a racial paradox that often reshapes and redefines the Black experience for the white gaze, very much like what happens in the real world. Kane shows that a pillar of the Black identity is rooted in surviving America through verbal and nonverbal exchanges via code switching. When the book was originally published, Toomer forbade his publisher from mentioning his race in the marketing for Kane. He said, "My racial composition and my position in the world are realities which I alone may determine." He also wouldn't allow his book to be included in any Black anthologies and insisted that he was part of a new emergent race simply called American. The last book is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. It's set in the 60s and 70s and follows identical twin sisters who run away from their home at age 16 after deciding they were fed up with living in the small Black town they grew up in. In this process, the two split up, and although they're identical, one chooses to live her life as a Black woman and the other decides to pass as white. The book really explores the nuances that exist within the Black community and rejects the idea that the most interesting stories are those that have conflicts between Black and white people. We see the examination of colorism within the community, which again is a result of white supremacy, but it also looks at the effect of colorism and what these characters are able to do in their lives. Bennett manages to write the characters in a way where they're able to see the ways in which people perceive them can determine their lives. Taking colorism to this extreme is something I've never seen in a book before, which makes it a really engrossing read. And it also makes you start to realize the absurdity of race as a construct. Oftentimes when we, especially in the Black community, read stories that focus on Black characters that pass as white, those stories are very moralizing, where the readers are meant to feel as though the characters are almost deserving of some sort of punishment. But in The Vanishing Half, we see this white passing character really grapple with her decisions that she's made over the course of her life. The book is uninterested in the question of whether or not it's good or bad to pass, rather what's gained and what's lost in that decision to become someone new and to leave your community behind. HBO outbid more than 15 other media companies for the rights to produce a limited series, landing Bennett a 7-figure deal in the process. Hopefully this context of code switching and these book recs give you a deeper understanding and a more vivid picture of the invisible struggles of being Black in America. Black bodies are beautiful bodies and should be loved and respected, and we shouldn't have to feel anxiety for simply moving through the world. And the reality is, we use code switching as a means of survival, but it doesn't protect us all the time because at the end of the day, we still Black.